The next video is the next installment for the Rum Rebellion, and we're up to Thursday the 7th of January. What a fiery meeting was had. There was almost 100 people present, and many of the women and the children came along too. Uncle George and Mr. Cayley spoke first. They told everyone how Governor Bligh had received us and how he listened to our requests for trial by a jury of the people and the changes to shipping regulations. They reported his comments on those who exploited their fellow settlers for their own financial interest, and many cheered when my uncle said the governor seemed particularly to detest John MacArthur. There was a great commotion when one man called from the back of the room, "But what will he do about it?" This man strode to the front and faced Uncle George and the others and spoke with great force, waving his fist around and speaking sometimes to them and sometimes to those of us seated on the grass in front of him. "This governor is just like the rest of them," he shouted. "Every governor has tried and every one of them has failed. The rum still flows and we know where the money goes. Bligh will be lily-livered and weak in the face of those who are rich and have influence back in London. Nothing will come of our petition here. We need men of our own to match MacArthur. Men who can get back to London and give the ear of fancy politicians, Lord What's his name and Duke someone or other, just the way MacArthur does." "Hear, hear," called a voice from the back. "And I suppose you are the one to do it," called another, in a sneering tone. "I may not have had the education of some of you. I may have arrived in this land in chains, but you all know that it were not for thieving or for forging or for arson or indeed for any crime against a person or a property, but for fighting for my country's liberty. And that is what we are doing here," said the man. "I do not have those fine connections, but we must find those who do." There was more yelling and shouting, and I felt quite dizzy, and the heat was making my eyes hurt. I pushed my way back through the crowd and found a stump to sit on, and rested my head on my hand. "And what is the matter with you?" a voice said behind me. It was a girl from Christmas Day. She dropped onto the ground beside me and didn't wait for an answer, which was all right by me because I had none to give her. "Is he not grand?" she went on. "Who?" I said. There was no one near us, and I had no idea who she meant. "My dad, of course. That is him out the front, telling everyone what should happen. Daniel O'Farrell." "Her father, the convict." I did not know what to say. I have never been so close to a girl before. Back home, when my mother and father were ill and Dr. Sampson came to visit, he told me he had a daughter my age, but I never saw her. I know there were girls at the school run by the women next door to the church, but I was not allowed there. I only saw them at morning service, and then there were rows of other people in between. "I hear you went and saw the governor," she said, and I nodded. "Tell me, is he as loud and as rude and as frightening as they say?" "My mum says he is the best swearer and curser in the whole of the British Navy, and my dad says that is really saying something. Did he swear while you were there?" "Did you actually speak to him? What was Government House like inside? I have only seen it from the gate when we went to Sydney Town last year." "Were you frightened of him?" I could not keep up with all the questions. I did not know if I was meant to. Did she want me to answer? Her eyes are deep blue-green, and she has got these black curls that bounce out from under her bonnet while she is talking. I could not take my eyes off her. "My mum says he is the greatest sailor of the age, even though he is an Englishman, and not a patch on St. Brendan, but I do bet you were scared a little." She stopped then, and although I had been determined not to admit my fear, I found myself nodding my head and saying, "Yes, a little." "I would not have been," she said. "It must have been grand." She stopped for a moment, then, as if she was thinking some serious thought, "But maybe it was only to draw a breath. If I had been there, I would have told him a thing or two. I would have told him how that scoundrel and his henchmen have made the Donlins and the McCanns sign their land over to them. because after the blight got into their wheat, they could not sell it for very much. They could not pay the money they owed, and now they all have to leave and go back to Sydney town. Maybe there is no work there, and their little ones will end up in the orphan school, and Mrs. Donlan says her heart is breaking. And she is not the only one. Kitty! Kitty! The tall boy who had been with her at Christmas pushed his way through the crowd. He grabbed her arm and pulled her to her feet. You know you should not be speaking to him. Come away. And he pushed her towards where the women and children stood at the back. When I think of it now, all I can see are those blue-green eyes. And that ends that installment for the Rum Rebellion.